All right, welcome everybody to another Getting Ready to Recover webinar series by DeKalb County UNITES. DeKalb County UNITES, what is it? So we're a grassroots movement within DeKalb County of people from Northern Illinois University, elected officials, government officials, nonprofit, private sector, you name it. Just a really great group of people that just came together instantly when the COVID-19 crisis and shelter in place happened. And we all identified that there was going to be a crisis within the small business community, and it was our charge to figure out how we can make a positive economic impact on the small business community in DeKalb County. That is our mission. That is what we're here for. If you go to DeKalbCountyUnites.com, you're going to find a wealth of information, lots of links to breaking down a lot of the programs that are out there, what programs are out there, as well as you're going to see links to our webinar series, and you can look back on past webinars where we've had a lot of great guests. Mark Kerman and Jock Sommese especially have been on a bunch on our Monday edition of Unplugged, but then we've also had restaurateurs on giving tips and tricks about how to be successful during this time, and we've got a lot of great webinars coming up. In fact, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 2 p.m., we have our webinar series. You can just go to DeKalbCountyUnites.com, click on webinars, and you can see all of them are coming up, who the speakers are. And we are gathering questions and answers during our webinars, and we're posting them to our website and our Q&A section as well. Also, any questions come up, and I know a lot of you are picking up the phone and trying to call either the SBA or trying to call the unemployment office, and you're getting nothing, right? Feel free to reach out on our Contact Us page, ask us a question, reach out to us on Facebook. We'll go and try and find the answer if we can get it. We'll do everything we can, because I know personally as a small business owner, a lot of the angst is just the unknown, right? You just want an answer to the question. Even if someone can tell you, I don't know yet, wait a couple more days, that's a great answer. Just something so you know at least you did what you needed to do and you're doing the right things. That's huge. So we're here to get those questions answered. Before I introduce all of our speakers today, I wanted to let you all know that we are not reciting the law. We are not, this is not the word of God coming down when we actually say something. What this is a lot of industry experts who have been in the weeds, in the trenches during this crisis. And there's a lot of information, a lot of knowledge with this group, and we're here to share it. But please always talk to your accountant, always talk to your attorney, always talk to your financial your lending, your banker, thank you, and get the information directly from them so you know that you're doing it right by the person who is going to be processing your application, filing your taxes, whatever it might be. All right, so without further ado, I wanted to introduce Courtney Strohacker. She's with the DeKalb County Convention and Visitors Bureau. She's going to be helping me with the question and answer today. My name is Cohen Barnes. I'm with Sundog IT, and I also co-chair the DeKalb County Unites Initiative. I'm here with Jock Sommese. He's with the Small Business Development Center. Incredible wealth of information and a resource for all small business owners. And in fact, on our website, I know we've got contact information for Jock. You can call him directly and get a lot of answers that are out there. We have Mark Kerman again from Siepert and Company. Mark, I got to say thank you. This is your third or fourth week doing this. I just really appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge. And today we have Tim Struthers with the First National Bank of Omaha to give us some of that lending perspective during our Q&A today. So real quick, there's been a couple new developments from some funds out there before we get into the PPP and EIDL that I wanted to cover. And even before that, all of you, if you have a question for us, move your mouse down to the bottom of your screen and you're gonna see a little Q&A. Click on that, type in your question, and then Courtney and I will make sure that we get all those questions answered during the course of this, because this is the most important piece of our webinars, is getting answers to all of your questions. And then we will post those questions and then the following answer to our website. Real quick, I did want to talk about the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation's Small Business Fund that just got released. In fact, if I remember right, and Jock, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can actually apply for that starting right now. I think it just started. And this is going to be...
at 2 o'clock today it started.
What's that?
At 2 o'clock today it started.
Yeah,
Go in, fill a small application. They'll ask your zip code to see if it qualifies immediately, because these are for distressed areas.
Perfect.
In my investigation, I haven't found what qualifies as a distressed area or not. I don't know if we're in that, but it's worth a shot. $5,000 grant. You know, again, it's get the money where you can.
I think we're all used to a complete lack of information at this point. The moral that I think all of us have been encouraging everyone is, look, if you're hurt by the COVID-19 crisis, apply. Just go and apply. Your accountant can help you figure out what to do. Your banker can help figure out what to do if you are approved and funds come in. But right now, if you need money, do everything you can to get the funds that are out there applied to you. And like Jock said, it's a $5,000 grant, so it's forgivable. They're just going to give you the money. It can be used for payroll, it can be used for rent, anything. It's really just a quick hit of cash to keep the lights on and the doors open during this crisis. And once again, you can Google and look up the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation's Small Business Fund. So that's a new one that's out there. Also, Jock, you want to talk about, there's another one, if I remember right, with the state of Illinois and the Treasurer's Office?
The Treasurer's Office, we just discovered this on Friday. I think this has been around for a while, but there are certain banks that qualify for getting these funds from the state and then loaning them out to borrowers at a rate less than 4.75%. Now, when I asked the people from the Treasurer's Office, are there personal guarantees involved? They didn't know. They really said it's up to the banker. The only thing they know is it cannot go higher than 4.75%. So the terms I'm not sure about. Other than the interest, that's really the only thing I know. The amounts I'm not sure, but the banks have these funds available, and it's pretty lucrative for them to send them out. Now, locally, I believe Holcomb Bank, and again, if there's branches in the area that you're from, whether it's DeKalb, whether it's Rochelle, no matter where you are, Holcomb happens to be one. Cohen, do you have the list in front of you of the others?
I do. My understanding is Waterman Street Bank, First National of Ottawa, and Holcomb Bank.
And I got that directly from their office because the website where they have the listing of the banks, DeKalb, for example, there are no banks listed in there, DeKalb County. The same for the city or the city of Genoa or the city of Sycamore. However, that being said, if there are branches of those three in your area, then you can go in and talk to somebody.
Yeah, and we can find out if there's more financial institutions in the area and definitely get that posted on the website as well. So thanks for that summary, Jock. We had a bunch of people come in after we started. So just really quick, everyone, if you need to ask us a question, just move your mouse down to the bottom of your screen, click on the Q&A button, type in your question, and Courtney and I will make sure that we get the answer taken care of. Courtney, is there a question right now? I've seen some qualifications, like I think on what Jock was saying, that cities that are in the lower 80% of communities, all of DeKalb County outside of Sycamore qualifies for this, Jock, is what we're hearing. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but there's a chance if you're not in Sycamore that loan that Jock just talked about might be available to you.
Great. I would go to the bank today. I would call up someone and talk to them.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that this money's going to run out also, but the Treasurer's office told me that more funds are coming if this does end up. And the strangest thing was, there's really not much has been given to Northern Illinois. Down south, yes. Central, yes, but not in Northern Illinois. So the time's right.
And I know Dawn put a question up here. Is the employee threshold a minimum of 3 employees? I believe it was between 3 and 20. I think that's kind of interesting that you had to have a minimum of 3, not 2, but I guess, is that the case, Jock?
Yeah, it is. And you can include yourself, though, which from talking to some people over the weekend about the PPP program and some of the issues that have happened, some people don't fill in any employees, but yet their 941 show 6 or 7. So, you know, as we talked about initialing it in the right place last week, there's still these issues that you need to give them accurate information for this thing to work. Okay.
And for more information on that, you can go to savesmallbusiness.com and there'll be just a wide variety of information on that particular loan that we just talked about. Okay. I thought we'd just kick it off, PPP. In fact, everyone, I am going to try something new here. I'm going to launch a poll. So there should be a poll that popped up on your screen. And ultimately what it is we're asking how many of you have applied for the PPP or the EIDL? How many have received funds for the EIDL? How many have received SBA approval for PPP? And how many have received their PPP funds? I mean, cash in the bank. I'm just dying to know how much does that happen? And boy, look at these results coming in. It looks like, wow. So So we have a couple people out there that have not applied for PPP or EIDL. Now that might be because of your particular situation. Maybe you know you don't qualify for those, but if you question whether you qualify or not, I would highly recommend you type your situation into our question and answer into the Q&A box and we get that answer for you. Or reach out on our contact us page on the DeKalb County UNITES, because the PPP program is a lifesaver for so many businesses. And if you qualify for it and you were impacted by the COVID-19 crisis, you need to apply for the PPP program. Looks like, so 24% have not applied for PPP, 19% have not applied for EIDL. 0, Jock, just so you know, have received funds for EIDL. So everyone that applied for that within 72 hours, $10,000 is going to be in your bank account. Woo! 0 people have gotten it. And that's what we've heard as well. So I'm not shocked by that one. I'm really happy to hear 71% of the people on the call today have received SBA approval for PPP, but are still waiting on the funds. But 14% people have actually received PPP funds in the bank. You can add me to the list as well. I didn't fill out the poll, but that just shows that there's still a lot more to come. Those, and Tim, I'm going to ask you this, those that have received SBA approval according to their financial institution, that pretty much guarantees that the money's coming, wouldn't it? And you're muted, Tim. Here, I can unmute you. Maybe.
Here we go.
There you go.
Yeah, we always hate to use the word guaranteed, right?
No.
So I'll have lots of disclaimers on things. But when you've been issued an SBA number, that is sort of the understanding that is locked in, and those dollars have been reserved for you by the SBA. So highly, highly probable. Again, this is a first time for everybody in every piece of this process, but you should feel pretty darn comfortable that when you get that approval or an SBA assigned number, that you're in the door.
Yeah, we're in contact with just a lot of organizations, obviously, because of what we're doing here. And everyone that raised their hand and said, I have an SBA approved number, every one of them ended up getting their money in their bank. So yeah, with what Tim's saying, I appreciate the qualification, Tim. But yeah, from what I've seen on the street, people that receive that approval actually get their funds. So let's continue down this path of the conversation. Through $349 billion were allocated towards the payroll protection program as part of the original $2.2 trillion stimulus package. But it's my understanding it's run out. So that $349 billion, everything is spoken for at this point. And my understanding is there's another $250 billion that is being talked about in Congress right now to be added to that original 349 to get funds to those that maybe not have applied yet or didn't get their SBA approval yet. Tim, I don't know if you can comment on that one. And share.
Yeah, that is something we're watching awfully closely. The number right now is that's being discussed is $300 billion, so that's good news. The Senate just closed up shop for the day and convened or recessed about 1:30 Central Time, and they did not move the legislation forward for the extension, which was disappointing. All expectations were that they would approve it today. The House would approve it tomorrow, and we would start to fund round 2 on Wednesday. Wednesday may still happen, but that would take the same day House and Senate approval, which is, I don't know if that's impossible, but so we're thinking Wednesday or Thursday are the expectations. The other thing I would share is what we are learning, kind of industry chatter, is that everyone and their brother is getting lined up to just hit send the minute this thing is alive. So the big banks and some of the fintechs, that sort of thing, with massive systems and massive connections to small business, will, as soon as it goes, flood with this what's called E-Tran, which is a transmittal portal into the SBA program. So given that, if you look at the pace of the depletion of the first round. Started relatively slow and then got very, very fast in the last 24 hours. We'd expect that speed in the last 24 hours to continue or maybe get faster with this new release. So all that said and done, kind of industry chatter is a couple of days, maybe through the weekend for round 2.
Tim, are you guys still accepting applications?
So we are, with a big disclaimer on the front end that says, we'll do our best. One, we'll accept applications, all of course contingent upon round 2 funding, and then of course the caveat is no guarantee that you'll get in based on the availability of funds. But yes.
And since I put you on the spot, then I just have another thing. With the $349 billion that in the PPP program, $5 billion of that went to banks. So, we felt sorry for them before because of all that they had to go through. However, and I'm not saying it's you, Tim, but it was kind of lucrative for them to do that.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say, and it's something we just haven't talked much about or put a pencil to. If you look at the trade-off between all the pieces and parts to it, priority number 1 is absolutely just getting this money to the businesses that needed it to keep the communities going. And beyond that, I don't have a whole lot of kind of really thought about it or insight.
Right.
Being close to this and watching everyone try and figure out when the first $349 billion was available, which lending institutions could actually you could apply with for the PPP program, which, by the way, that was any lending institution that was SBA 7A approved. So there was that piece. Then the lending institution was trying to figure it out, and there was a bunch of confusion with Congress and the rules, and it took a while for large banks to figure out how to process tens of thousands of applications. It took a little while for small banks to figure it out. I know people have gotten their systems down and in place, but you're right, Tim, when the green light is hit and the flood comes through, I would highly encourage no one to be discouraged by, oh, I'm too late, I shouldn't apply. Right now, you have no idea how quickly your financial institution might get your application through. We have no idea the size of all of them. For all we know, it's just tons of little requests, so that 250 might go longer, or the 300 billion, I guess you said, Tim, might go longer than that original 349 billion. But what I have to make sure is, after seeing a bunch of you haven't applied for the PPP program, you need to contact your financial institution now, and you need to get your application in, because this is an absolute lifesaver. And if you want to know more about the PPP program, you can see one of our previous webinars where we go into detail on what does it actually mean for businesses. But that is the most impactful piece of stimulus money out there across the board. Doesn't matter, federal government, state, local, that is the most impactful piece to your business. So highly encourage you, get educated on it and definitely apply. So a lot of people on this, over 70% have actually applied for the PPP program and got SBA approved. Fantastic. So we know 3/4 of our audience right now. And before I forget, Phil chimed in. He got EIDL monies, Jock. He got the 10,000. So we have one person in DeKalb County that we know of that actually got EIDL money. But so a lot of us are gonna either have received the PPP funding already or are about to receive the PPP funding. And I thought it's a good time, and I know there's still some confusion on what you can apply towards it. But I thought we'd break that down really quick and then talk about maybe some best practices for accountability. So when we go to like financial institutions like First National Bank of Omaha, what is it you're going to want us to produce in order to verify the expenditures that we have actually qualify for the forgiveness portion of the PPP loan? So I thought I'd ask you, Mark, really quick, if you could break down what are qualifying expenses that you can submit for the PPP program for that 8 weeks worth of forgiveness?
Okay. So valid expenses would include, and majority of which would be contained within payroll costs. Now, your payroll costs are going to be your wages. It does include commissions that you pay to employees, tip pay, any of those items where you're issuing payroll and it goes on a W-2 for your employees. In addition to that, it also does include covering health insurance. So group health insurance on behalf of your employees. If you have any other group insurance, such as dental, vision, any of those other types of expenditures that you're paying on behalf of your employees, those qualify as valid expenses. Your match into a retirement plan. So if you have a simple plan, if you have a 401k, any of those company matches, if it's coming out of the employee, obviously it's the employee's portion. But if it's coming out of the employer, it's something you're covering on behalf of your employees. That's a valid payroll cost that you are eligible to submit. From there, then we get into expenditures such as rent. So rent expense that you're paying on a building that you're occupying.
Hey, real quick, Mark, if you don't mind, if we could stay on payroll for a second, what about bonuses? I've gotten the question of people have incentivization plans within their organization where they pay out quarterly bonuses based off performance of hitting certain KPIs. Are those qualified too?
Okay, so the short answer to your question is yes, if it's a valid payroll expenditure. I'm going to defer to the lenders with respect to what they're going to say qualifies for loan forgiveness on their side. But from my perspective, that's a valid payroll expenditure, and so certainly that would qualify on from my perspective. Yes.
Okay. And then two other quick things. I've heard something about the federal taxes that we contribute as part of our payroll. Does that not qualify, or does that qualify?
Does not. So, and actually, what you're speaking about is actually, if you're talking about withholding, that's coming out of the employee anyway. So what we're really talking about here are costs of the employer, right? So we're talking about on the federal side, it's Social Security and it's Medicare. Those do not qualify. But what does, and what also doesn't qualify would be federal unemployment taxes. What does qualify, and this is kind of an interesting timing here, but what does qualify is your SUTA, so your state unemployment taxes that you're paying on behalf of your employees. Now, this is a quarterly month. So in the first quarter, we have January through March payroll that was issued. You have to pay your payroll taxes for SUTA by April 30th. So this is actually kind of an interesting timing, because if you have not yet paid your SUTA, if you have not yet paid your state unemployment taxes that are due by April 30th, those would qualify if your loan has been issued, if your loan origination date is prior to that April 30th. So if you haven't paid them, and if your loan origination date happens, let's say today, it would fall within that 8-week period, and you will have paid those unemployment taxes after that loan origination date. So it would fall within that period and it would qualify.
Okay.
So it's kind of just an interesting, peculiar timing. And the first quarter is always the highest that you would have for state unemployment. So that's always going to be the highest amount.
As is usually the case, when you listen to Mark, you realize having a good accountant is important through this. Mark, and Tim, you can chime in anytime if you had additional information to add. But if we move on to other valid expenditures, you were going to talk about utilities or something, Mark?
Yeah, so utilities also qualify for this purpose, and the definition of utilities is a little ambiguous, and I guess again I may want to defer to lenders on this, but from what we've been reading, what we've seen, it doesn't only include your electric bill, it doesn't only include your gas and your waste disposal, but also your telephone and your internet expenses as well. So those are commonly viewed as utilities for that purpose. So we believe that would also qualify as utilities. So my recommendation is, if you have any of those invoices, any of those bills that are coming due, and you haven't hit your loan origination date, hold off. Wait a week. Wait till you get your loan origination, then pay that bill, because that would then fall within the 8-week period. In addition to that, mortgage interest. So one of the things that I want to make sure that I'm clear on this as well, mortgage interest qualifies, not the principal, but the interest. But it qualifies on not only the building that you're occupying, but any type of property that's mortgaged. So for the sake of discussion, if you have a company vehicle is property that's mortgaged, and the interest that you're paying on that would qualify. If you have equipment that you're operating in your business, so you need a large piece of equipment to operate, if you're making payments on that large piece of equipment, the interest on that should qualify as well.
So Mark, so when we say mortgage, we have to get out of the mindset of it being a mortgage for a piece of property, a real estate property.
In this case, that's correct. Yeah, it's not only real property, but it's also personal property as well. So both would qualify for that function.
In my understanding,
independent contractors fall into payroll or expenses, or not really?
Could you? I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Independent contractors. Where do
They do
they
not
qualify? If they don't qualify as payroll,
Correct.
do they qualify as expenses?
Well, again, we're very specific with what expenses qualify. Rent, utilities, mortgage interest. Those are the qualifying expenses. So an independent contractor does not fall within any of those categories, so the answer is no.
And Mark, and maybe to you too, Tim, my understanding is, so you've got that 8-week period. So all these qualifying expenditures that fall in when loan origination date happened, clock starts ticking, 8 weeks later, clock is over. All the bills that we just talked about that are in that 8-week period are what we're going to submit. But what we have to be clear on is a minimum of 75% of those expenditures have to be payroll related, and no more than 25% of the utilities can be that portion of it. So the whole goal here is this is a payroll protection program. So they want to make sure that a lion's share of this money, and in fact, at least 75% of it is all payroll related, which means if you only have 50% of it payroll related, then that's it. You won't get any of your utilities or anything else written off. Would that be correct?
No.
No, good. Awesome. Educate us, man. Educate us.
It's 75% of the loan forgiveness. So again, you're not talking about, the way you're looking at it is an incorrect view. It's basically, if we say 100,000 can be forgiven, then 25,000 of that can be in the form of rent, utilities, mortgage interest. And that's even if the loan that you were given was higher than that 100,000. So we're looking at 75% of the loan forgiveness is in the form of payroll costs.
So using that 100,000, let's say, if 90,000 of it was payroll, awesome, you got 90K right there. And then you could only use $10,000 of rent, utilities, stuff like that.
If in your example, you're saying 100,000 was the amount loaned.
Yes.
Then yes.
Yeah, 90 and 10 in that case. Okay, that was a great explanation. How about, and Tim, this might fall on you, and I don't even know if you guys have gotten to the point of this conversation, but can you tell us at all about the verification process? Like, what are you going to be looking for? So I can start collecting it right now. And
Cohen, leave Tim alone. I mean, Cohen, give Tim a break here.
Yeah, it's a fascinating discussion to hear, and I'm learning as much as I'm kind of sharing. But before I jump into that, there's probably three things or two other items I'll touch on real quick. So Mark, on the expenses, this concept of cash versus accrual, is that well defined in your mind?
Well, it's been indicated in the bill paid. The terminology that's been utilized has been paid, not accrued, but rather paid.
Cash, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So the timing of that does become critical, right? And it's sort of a coin toss when your loan starts and that 8-week period ends. The other piece is I just want to encourage everyone to be very mindful of the math on this and the fact that they don't go into it thinking that it's going to be forgiven. Surely understand your situation. Every single business has a very dynamic or different cost structure. In some, it's very easy. You can kind of see it and it's forgiven. Others would have cost structure that has a whole lot more fixed expenses that are outside of the program that fall in that 25% piece. So there's a fair amount of the loan that would need to be repaid. So just go into it with your eyes wide open. up front, and I think, again, read beyond the headlines. So with respect to forgiveness, it's fascinating. So the requirements upon the bank, very similar to the requirements on the bank on the front end, are very limited. This is really, we're a conduit in this process between the small business and the U.S. government. And so we're going through a very high level verification process, a lot around making sure the person is the person, they're legitimate, organizations and that sort of thing. And that the documents are reasonable. Beyond that, this is really a deal between you and the government. And you want to be really fair about that. So I think about like taxes, right? So if the tax rates go down at some point in time, same with the banks, and I think same with you, there will be a review of this process, right? With this much money in play, you want to be sure you're right. So as Cohen started this off, absolutely positively make sure you have professional guidance and advice from accountants and lawyers in the process. So as to what qualifies, you can just see, and then I'm reading an update right now as we speak, and then the very parting terms are SBA will issue additional guidance on loan forgiveness, period. So it is absolutely a work in motion. What I would, my advice is to keep documentation as tight as you can. Exactly how you do that, can't begin to opine on that, but keep your documentation as orderly as you can and follow the advice and guidance of your professionals. Because everyone's got a little different slant on this deal. And at the same time, and it may feel good now, you put it in and you get it out, but I don't know what the tail on this thing will be, right, for everybody. But just like doing your taxes, right? If you're overly aggressive, you wouldn't want to do that. Overly conservative, you wouldn't want to do that, right? So you want to understand it and hit it right down the center.
How about is thinking of the forgiveness piece? Let's say you dotted every I, crossed every T, and you submitted everything, and it was pristine. Is there an opportunity for the federal government to come back and make a judgment call on whether you deserve the money or not? Or is it simply going to be, look, if you can document payroll, utilities, blah, blah, that's it. That's all we care about at this point. I'm curious if there's been any rumblings, or like you were talking, Tim, that later on there could be not a reckoning, but some accountability on your documentation for the forgiveness. What about eligibility at all? Is that even part of the play, or is that not it?
Surely have not heard that discussion at all. I think the way we look at this is from stage to stage of guidance, be sure that you're tight with what we knew at the time. So as things have changed, there was some definitions around the sole proprietor or independent contractor and how that income was being calculated, changed middle of last week. So, from whatever Friday to Tuesday, we were doing it this way, and a Wednesday to whatever Saturday this way. So we're making certain that we were tight with what was going on at that given time. So, you've got to take the rule, as it reads, and base your decisions at that time as it reads exactly.
Because I was curious there's a lot of organizations that have made national news right now, like Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, people that have received millions of PPP money, yet eligibility, real need wasn't necessarily there. So that's why I was just curious about that. How about best way to track expenses? We've kind of touched on this before, Mark, but I didn't know if there's any more guidance or thoughts you might have on it. Like we have explained where I'm going to have a bank account that has my money in it, and when I cut my rent check, I'm going to transfer that amount out of that bank account into my general fund, essentially, and I'm going to make a tie there. So when it comes time for verification of my documentation, I'm going to have one bank statement, and everything in there is going to be what I determined was a one-to-one match for a valid expense. And any thoughts on this, either one of you, on strategies that, since some of us are receiving funding already, that I need to start documenting things well right now?
Well, I'll chime in. I'm a big advocate for, I guess the first piece I'm going to say is even a little bit beyond what you're asking, but I'm a big advocate for projecting forward. So you get that loan in place. I think you should already be taking steps to having an idea of how much of your loan is going to be forgiven just based on your anticipated expenditures that you're going to be having coming in over these next 8 weeks, and spend the time on the front end to say, okay, well, this is the expected payroll that I'm going to be paying over these next 8 weeks. These, if everybody that's working for me is working 40 hours, this is the pay that they should be getting. And then, the next step, okay, well, how much rent am I going to be paying over that period? What are my normal utilities that I would pay? And I would actually spend time doing kind of a flow chart and a projection to say, all right, well, this is what I would expect my loan forgiveness to be before I even do anything for it. But then from there, I guess my thought is, I would keep a separate ledger, even if I keep everything. For the sake of discussion, a lot of you are small businesses out there using QuickBooks. In addition to QuickBooks, I would probably be pulling that into a separate ledger, because ultimately the banks are going to need to see all of the valid expenses, and they don't want to look at your whole QuickBooks account. They want to see the expenses that you incurred that were valid, that went towards that purpose. And then obviously you're probably going to have to come up with additional items such as copies of 941s, payroll tax returns, those types of things to validate what it was that you actually did in fact incur. So from my perspective, A, plan on the front end, but B, be documenting it in a separate ledger somewhere. It should obviously complement what you have in QuickBooks. The numbers should be the same, but you would want to have a separate ledger so that can be something provided directly to the lender to make their life easier. We don't want to make their life difficult to have to sit and sift through everything that you incurred and all of your business activity for that entire period, because a lot of it's not going to qualify anyhow.
So essentially, the clearer we make it, the better, is what.
Exactly.
Yeah. Tim?
Mark, are you able to prepay expenses then?
Well, that's a debatable question. I think ultimately that's going to probably fall on the lenders. I don't have a definitive answer for that.
So again, I'll come back and say two things. So Mark, and again, I'll smile with that, right? The lender, and keep in mind, what are the conduits? So we're going to check some boxes on documentation. But yeah, and I asked a accrual or cash question in part because of that, right? That can you prepay? It just, there's a lot of greatness. I would say on the documentation side, more documentation, the better. Keep it clean and tight. Some people have talked about new bank accounts, separate bank accounts. I think that would be, an extreme. Some people are doing that. Yeah. Just literally just going it. So yeah, you're literally, every dollar goes in and every dollar goes out. But absolutely make it as tight as you can possibly make it. And to the guidance on forecasting ahead is absolutely the right thing to do. Hey, Cohen, I have a 2:44 hard stop. I wasn't sure of the exact time of this, but just keep that in mind as you size up your questions here.
Well, how about one right out of the gate? The PPP program, the loan itself is a 1% interest rate loan. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. What about, am I paying 1% on 8 weeks worth of money that ends up getting forgiven?
It is my understanding that is that interest accrued during the forgiveness period is forgivable.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm looking for questions. No, that'd be Mark. How about, well, Tim, do you have any parting thoughts? Before, I've got more questions to ask, but specifically around the lender, that was the last one.
Yeah, I would, again, to your advice at the beginning, I would agree with Wright. This is a very, really, really good program for those on the phone who have not gotten in the queue. Study, understand what it is that you're doing, make the application as tight as humanly possible. Again, get advice and guidance on the front end of that, but do it fast. The tighter and cleaner it is, the more likely you're going to get through the channels faster. And then make sure that you understand what your obligations are on the backside as well. But It absolutely positively is a program that is designed to get money to Main Street as fast as we possibly can. And if you're a business that has been impacted by COVID-19, boy, oh boy, you should take advantage of it. And again, with your eyes wide open to make sure you understand it, but get in that line fast.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
Hey,
We've got some
Tim,
more
can I
questions
ask
that we're
a
going to.
question?
Sure.
Tim, are you guys still making normal loads?
Yeah, while we were talking, I had that question come in. Business is still going on, right? In some cases, with any natural disaster of any kind, right, there's a lot of impact on the negative, but other businesses surge and demand increases. So there's that going on. And then there's more longer term structural kinds of refinancing, or maybe there's an acquisition in place, right? Someone's in the process of buying something, mergers or consolidations, fortifying their balance sheets. So it's definitely at a slower pace, but it is going on.
Good news, though.
So we should be talking to our banker to kind of figure out what best we can do.
Well, yeah, the reality of it is that, we're just talking about getting through this immediate period now, right? The world we've hit reset as a globe, right? 30 days ago. So the outcome of this, boy, there's a whole lot more business and banking to do, right? That comes out of this immediate relief program. And that's where I think, so this is a nice safety net for a lot of people for a little while. Well, boy, what are the business ramifications of this virus? Intermediate and long term will be significant, right? In some way, shape, or form.
Tim, we do have a question before you go, because I've got it's like a minute and a half left of your time. How about, so the 8-week period comes to a close. How long is the process, do you think, going to take between verification and forgiveness of the dollars spent during those?
It's a really good question. I don't have any idea. Yeah, I don't. I would expect, again, just me personally expected. I think as the approvals went really fast once they got to the SBA portal and check, my guess is that would be pretty quick coming back. I think, again, the review process, it will happen at some point in time. I mean, I keep thinking of the taxes, right? You cross every T, dot every I, you interpret the guidance, you submit it, you get a refund, right? And there's a certain look back period. I mean, there's a time there. So I think, and you get that refund back instantly, just like the money was given instantly.
Yeah, makes sense.
My hunch would be it'd be very fast, and then there'd be this time to check back if they have to.
Well, Tim Struthers, I can't thank you enough for coming on today and shedding light on some of these questions. I know you got to go, so go ahead and hop off whenever is best for you. And thanks again for your time.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate the insight, and thank you for kind of the interest, Cohen, and leadership in this thing, because it's so important that we as a community rally together. This is a massive shock to our system, and it takes a grassroots effort like this to keep us up. So thanks, everyone.
Yep.
See ya.
I have, question here, from Tim. Can you explain the 8-week period? The funds we received have to be used only in the 8 weeks from the funding received before the funds we received have been used only in the 8 weeks from the funding received to be forgiven. Yes, I think is the answer to that question, Tim. You have to spend the money on those qualified expenses in that 8-week period, starting from loan origination. So the date on your loan documents, 8 weeks later, stop. And as Mark said, from a cash perspective, from an accounting cash perspective, bills that are paid for payroll and other qualified expenses, that's what will be eligible for being forgiven. And I did love Tim's, the way he put it, that it might be a lot like taxes, which makes a lot of sense, where there's a lot of initial trust, but then the government, just like the IRS, comes knocking at your door sometimes. There'll be a verification piece that'll probably come on later. And that was really cool to hear, because that makes a lot of sense on how they're going to expeditiously let business owners know that money is forgiven at this point, so they can continue making business decisions.
Cohen, can I ask Mark a question, please?
Absolutely.
So, Mark, if I've been doing my payroll, let's say I haven't been doing my payroll, but I know that I'm going to get the dollars in, and I know that it's 10 days before I get it. So on day one, when I know I'm going to get it, I pay myself at an accelerated rate. Is that okay? To make up for my back wages?
Right.
You see how my mind works, Mark. So.
No, this is a slippery slope here, Jock. You understand?
Yeah, I know that. We're entrepreneurs. There's a lot of gray that we always enter into.
All right. Here's what I'm going to tell you. The first piece that you need to know and you need to understand is they will look at the wages that are paid on a per employee basis. And if any of the wages, if the amount is paid, the amount that's paid to any particular employee during that 8-week period, and you have to extrapolate it to the full year. If any of those amounts exceed $100,000 for a year, they'll lop it off, and
I got that.
They'll stop it right at whatever that $100,000 would be for the equivalent of that 8-week period. So I'm going to use that as my perspective when I'm giving you your answer, right? So I'm going to use that as my perspective and say, okay, I think what we do in my business, we call the smell test, okay? And the smell test is basically you look at something and say, does this make sense? Is this reasonable? Okay? And I believe that as this is continuing to evolve, and you and I have both seen this, right? It continues to change. And so we think that the set of rules are this, and then all of a sudden they've kind of progressed and they've become, they've gotten to this point, and now we have to follow this new set of rules, right? So I'm looking at it, if I'm advising a client, I'm going to say, try to keep your expenditures reasonable. Back to your question, can you prepay? Well, if you're asking me, well, do I prepay a year in advance? I don't think that passes the smell test. And I think at some point they're going to come back and say, this just isn't going to fly. Yeah. And we're not going to allow it, right? So even though we haven't seen that come out yet, I believe that that's going to be one of those things, one of those items that they're going to wrap back around on that Tim is referring to. So I think we need to be reasonable in any of the expenditures that we're incurring and make sure that we're not going overboard. However, to your point, if you issue a bonus to somebody to play catch up, is that reasonable? Well, if you look at it based on what that person makes over the period of a year, and they didn't make something earlier on in the year and you're catching up, can that be reasonable? I think that can pass the smell test, yes. Does that answer your question?
Mark, I'm very impressed that you found a little loophole there. I like that.
I don't find loopholes, no.
Hey, we got 2 quick questions before we wrap up here. One, Roger Hopkins. I think we answered that one on who administers the PPP loan forgiveness eligible costs, the bank or the SBA, and then who administers the forgiveness piece. Obviously, the bank is just going to be checking boxes, what it comes down to, and it's really going to be up to the SBA, and they're going to come around later and most likely verify that, especially if something doesn't pass the smell test. We have a question from Ronald. He applied for the EIDL, was a 10-minute online questionnaire. That's the one, Ronald. 2+ weeks ago. How long of a turnaround time for answer questions from them? Boy, if you can answer that one, Ronald, if we can find that answer, time to buy a lottery ticket. But as far as we know, you are not going to, or hopefully you're going to hear something, but we did a poll earlier and everyone that's applied, there's only one person that's actually received any funding for that. So pretty much the SBA has gone dark, it seems like, on that, including with me. I applied and I've never heard a word since my original application. So who knows, Ronald, is what it comes down to. And I wish we had something better for you. How about any closing comments at all from anyone, any of our panelists before we wrap this up?
I wanted to make sure you saw Brian and Lauren both mentioned that Save Small Business website has been overloaded already, the one that just opened at 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I did. I saw that and overlooked saying that.
Can we also show a surprised face right now?
Yeah, right. So keep, for everyone that might have missed that, it's the SaveSmallBusiness.com, up to $5,000 grant from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. keep checking that website and apply. If you were impacted by the COVID-19 crisis, just keep trying, and you might get through maybe at 1 in the morning and get your application in. Closing thoughts.
Can I give some good news? What I think might be good news?
Awesome.
The banks that are dealing with the SBA have a vested interest in making sure that the forgiveness is there, because the SBA is guaranteeing that loan. So the fact that the SBA is guaranteeing that loan, that means the bank is going to get that money. So they're going to be probably a great advocate at the end of the day to make sure that the forgiveness happens.
Yeah, agreed.
And this has happened for years with SBA loans, where they really have to cross the T's and dot the I's, as we've been saying, in order to get that guarantee funded. So I think they're really going to have your best interest at heart.
Yeah, awesome. Mark, any?
I guess I just want to kind of wrap back around a little bit with respect to the small lenders that we have in the community. Unfortunately, there's been some news coming out recently with respect to some abuses with respect to this program. I've seen nothing but professionalism and wonderful service that's being given by our small lenders here in this community. I think they've done a great job to take care of the community and the businesses at large. So I just want to commend all of those banks that are participating in this local community, because they have really done a good job to take care of the businesses here.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I've heard nothing but good stories, and a lot of people working really hard to get this done for the small businesses in DeKalb County. So thanks for that, Mark. Courtney, did we miss any others, or are we good to go?
We got all the questions. Just want to make sure that you highlight our next two webinars.
Yep,
that are
exactly. So as I mentioned at the beginning, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 2 p.m., DeKalb County UNITES has a webinar series. This Wednesday, so in 2 days from now, we're going to have our Getting Ready to Recover, or Getting Ready for Recovery Small Business Marketing Survival Kit. We're going to have Brian Oster from OC Creative on, and he's just going to share insights and strategies on how small businesses can sustain their marketing efforts during these austere times. Because right now it's even more important that we're getting ourselves out there and becoming top of mind. So when shelter in place does become rescinded, people want to go to your organization first as they start spending their dollars. And then this Friday as well, part of our Getting Ready for Recovery, we have Refresh, Retool, and Restore. It's going to be a great panel. We've got multiple local small business owners that are coming on and sharing the strategies of how they pivoted during these times. And some of them are crushing it. Some of them are still struggling, but they've done some unique things, and they're here just to share, hey, this is what we've done during this time, and I know you're going to get some tidbits out of that. I always do. So be sure and go to DeKalbCountyUnites.com, and you can register for those webinars coming up. With that, I think that's all we've got. So just everyone have a wonderful week, and DeKalbCountyUnites.com for all your questions and answers on anything COVID-19 crisis related. All right, take care everyone, and thanks panelists. I really appreciate it.
See you Wednesday.